Good morning and welcome to the Therapeutic Use of Humor in Treatment and Recovery with our presenters Tom Farley and Mark Sanders. This webinar is co-sponsored by the Great Lakes ATTC and Great Lakes MHTTC and SAMHSA. The Great Lakes ATTC, MHTTC, and PTTC are funded by SAMHSA under the following cooperative agreements. The opinions expressed in this webinar are the views of the speaker and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services and SAMHSA. The ATTC and MHTTC networks believe that words matter and uses affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities. From a few housekeeping items for you, if you're having any technical issues, please individually message me, Jen Winslow, or Alyssa Kuala in the chat section, and we will be happy to assist you. If you have questions for the speakers, please put them in the Q&A section rather than the chat, and we will do our best to get them addressed. We are leaving some time at the end for questions. If captions or live transcript would be helpful, please use your Zoom toolbar to enable them by selecting live transcript. Certificates of attendance will be emailed to all who attend this webinar live in full. Please allow up to 2 weeks to process. You will automatically be redirected to a short survey after the close of this webinar. For more upcoming events and information, please follow us on social media or visit our website. Now I'm going to introduce our presenters. Tom Farley grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, and graduated from Georgetown University with a degree in marketing. He began his career in banking and finance, living and working in the New York City area. From 1999 to 2012, he ran the Chris Farley Foundation, a nationally recognized nonprofit dedicated to substance abuse prevention. Like his brother, Tom was successful in opening the eyes and ears of youth audiences through the powerful and effective use of humor. In 2008, he wrote The Chris Farley Show, a New York Times best-selling biography of his late brother, the actor and comedian Chris Farley. He has been interviewed on The Today Show, Good Morning America, Larry King Live, Fox News, and The View. He has also been featured in People magazine, USA Today, and several national and regional newspapers and publications. Tom has served on the Dane County Human Services Board and several nonprofit boards. Tom works for Rosecrans Behavioral Health as the Professional Relations Coordinator for Wisconsin. He's also a motivational speaker, delivering messages on prevention and recovery. Tom lives in Madison, Wisconsin. Mark Sanders is the Illinois State Project Manager for the Great Lakes ATTC, MHTTC, and PTTC. He is an international speaker and behavioral health consultant whose presentations and publications have reached thousands throughout the United States, Europe, Canada, West Indies, Lithuania, and Guam. He is the recipient of 4 Lifetime Achievement Awards, including NADAC's prestigious Enlightenment Award, and the National Association for Addiction Professionals 50th Anniversary Legends Award, the Illinois Certification Board's Professional of the Year Award, and Jessica Hayes Lifetime Achievement Award, and the Barbara Bacon Award for Outstanding Contributions to the social work profession as an alumnus of Loyola University of Chicago. Mark is the author of 5 books on behavioral health recovery. Recent writings include Slipping Through the Cracks, Intervention Strategies for Clients with Multiple Addictions Disorders, and Relationship Detox, a counselor's guide to helping clients develop healthy relationships in recovery. His groundbreaking monograph, Recovery Management, is co-authored with historians William White and Ernest Kurtz, helps shift substance use disorders treatment and recovery from the acute care model towards a recovery-oriented system of care. Mark is the primary contributing author of Trauma-Informed Gun Violence Prevention Curriculum, which is now being implemented in several large cities throughout the U.S., and he authored 2 stories published in the New York Times bestselling Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. In addition to his behavioral healthcare work, Mark has a 30-year career as a university educator, having taught at the University of Chicago, Loyola University of Chicago, and Illinois State University School of Social Work. He is also the co-founder of Serenity Academy in Chicago, a program which sponsors recovery-oriented peer groups in local high schools. And now I will turn it over to our presenters.
All righty. I guess I'm up first. Let's see if we can get to, okay, outline. Yes, we did that. Next. There we go. That's me, Tom Farley. Could keep going. I don't know why I did this as a build slide. Keep going. So let me start with my story, as it always does. So I like to yeah, um, kind of put you back in this time about 26 years ago. I had kind of a nice career out in New York. I was a marketing professional with three kids and a wife and three kids, dog. Thinking that my life was on a track. Um, and uh, my little brother Chris had just left Saturday Night Live. Um, 5 years working there, and that was a lot of fun. Then he went out to LA to make some movies. And at that about 26 years ago, I was sitting in the office of a friend of mine who I went to college with, and he had had some experience in the entertainment industry. And we were meeting, we wanted to come up with maybe some kind of a event or program that we could incorporate, Chris and a couple of his SNL buddies into some sort of charity thing or something fun. And so we were kind of throwing ideas out. And in his office in Connecticut, he always had a TV next to his desk, and it was always CNN was always kind of looping. He always wanted to keep abreast of things. But while we were meeting, it was muted. And so we were talking, and out of the corner of my eye, I see Chris. And it was Chris and David Spade. It was some clip from Tommy Boy. And I turned over, and at that point, I had gotten pretty used to seeing my brother on TV. Um, so I didn't think anything of it. But I went over to turn the volume up because I was just wondering what he was up to, and, why he was on CNN. And as soon as I did, the screen jumped to his apartment that he had in Chicago, the John Hancock building with an ambulance up front. And the anchor is saying that we just heard that the actor comedian Chris Farley just died of a drug overdose. And so that's how I learned that my little brother had passed away from this disease. And my first thought was, how do I process this? There was a lot of I thought I was pretty unique. Who has to go through this? I had, Access Hollywood pounding on my door that very night, looking for a comment. So my life changed. Um, and you know, just as an aside, I learned pretty quickly that I wasn't so unique. I wasn't so alone. The people that have shared that same loss and grief there were many, and that number has only grown. Um, and the drug that killed Chris, heroin, I thought, how could anything be worse than this? Chris and I had actually talked about how bad this drug was, and yet here we are, 26 years later. There is a worse drug that's killing almost on contact. So, um, luckily for me, I realized that the only way to really deal with this was to talk about it. A lot of my family members didn't do that. They internalized a lot of this grief, but I leaned into it. I wanted to make a difference. So I started going into schools initially just to tell the story and hopefully prevent somebody else from just one person from going down that road. Um, but it was interesting. I going into schools, the mission of the very buildings that they were in was one of, education, information, knowledge. And these programs at that time was prevention were being delivered by professional teachers who had that skill set. Well, I didn't have that skill set. So I had to kind of come up with something else. And two things I realized is first of all, we can give all this knowledge out, but for some reason we're still having this issue. What was missing? What could I add to all these great programs and prevention programs that are knowledge based? And I looked at my brothers. I looked at not just Chris, but my brothers Kevin and Johnny, and now my son, who's out in LA now, all went through Second City. And they used their gifted humor to connect to audience. And I was dealing with, young kids, and I thought, well, you have two choices dealing with kids and young adults. You have music or humor, and you're a long way to getting their attention. So I didn't have music, but I definitely had humor. So even though this was a serious subject matter, I knew that was the language I had. So um, I initially used the humor just to gain their attention. Um, but I also looked at my brother's work at Second City, and I realized, because I studied it, and that's what I do. I'm the brother. I'm the smart brother that studied. So I realized that that improv was how they were connecting. So that became my tool. I started to understand the concept of improv, and and using that to connect and to create what I like to call peer enhanced environments as opposed to peer pressure environments, because it's done in a group. It's an ensemble, which we'll talk about more and more as we get along. So I also, kind of learned the humor, the pros and cons, how it can be a coping skill, but it can also, it can help with trauma. But if you, like anything else, if you don't moderate it, it can be, um, it can turn into trauma, this coping skill. So go to the next slide. So I really, used the concepts of improv to define connection, um, a need for people to bond, making connections in this kind of safe environment. Because I was teaching these these way how to communicate. So um, it was and it was fun. It was a serious subject matter, but it used humor to really get through to people. Um, so I leaned into it, and it was great. So go to the next one. Uh, and I started with, on the next slide. Oh yeah, here we go. The history of improv. And what I learned was that it was started by this woman in Chicago, Viola Spolin, who was working with at-risk inner city kids in, the south side of Chicago, the old Cabrini Green area. And she developed these games, these exercises to really kind of, help people communicate better and create ensembles. And so I started there, started with communication. I realizing that your communication, you only need two things: a sender and a receiver. And so, one of these games, I would do these games to not just to help the people communicate, but also to kind of form the ensemble. So let's talk about um, improv. Let's go to the next one. So improv, pretty simply put, is really just based one rule, is the rule of yes and. Is the golden rule of improv. Implies that a participant in a performance, should accept what the other person has offered. That's the yes, and then expand that line of thinking, the and. So it's really not literally yes. It's really just, I heard you. I accept that it's a gift, and then the and um, it implies that you're trying to be positive and go forward, you know. Um, so we started to do these games that really kind of emphasize this uh, concept of improv. So go to the next slide. Um, and there were really neat things. And if you look at some of these guidelines, you look at some of the issues that we have in both treatment and recovery, is this feeling of isolation. And as a matter of fact, we've been talking about these diseases, mental illness and substance use disorder, as diseases of isolation. We've known that for years, but we don't talk about enough is the flip side of that, which is you can't heal in isolation. We can do a lot of therapy and understanding our traumas and what brought us here and why we feel this certain way, and that's all good stuff. But again, the next step beyond that is how do I heal? And you can't do that on your own. You need, we as humans are hardwired for connection, and that's the best place um, for healing to occur. And so, you look at improv, it's teaching you how to listen, to be present, to be aware, deferring judgment, to accept the potential of ideas. I love that, reframing the positive turnaround, share and focus. So it's not yes, but, or yes, maybe. It's it's yes and um, declaring a point of view. And this is a really important thing about improv, as well as when you go into connection, is to be authentic, clear, speak your mind. You can't do that if there's fear or mistrust. Um, the ensemble uh, allows you to make mistakes. It allows you to declare your point of view and be authentic, and not have this we get so paralyzed by this, am I going to say the right thing, or how am I going to be judged? And you when you are isolated and feel alone, it's very easy to feel that way. But building the ensemble, building this place of trust and acceptance allows you to do that. And if there is a mistake, the ensemble has your back. And the last thing is jump in, declare your a bias toward action, which I love, because our minds just are so full of all these thoughts and ideas, and sometimes they paralyze us, and we overthink. And so these exercises, these simple little games and exercises, really bring us out of that place of isolation. Um, and of course, wrapped around all of this is the concept of fun, and that really is that humor is that coping mechanism that allows that to happen. It allows that connection that to initially start. So go to the next slide. I love this slide. I talk about this all the time. I talk about the ensemble when I talk about connection, and that's what improv does. It really, it really points out that every instrument is different. You could have a big tuba on one side and a small clarinet on the other. Is the tuba the best instrument because it's the biggest, deepest? No. I mean, every instrument, if allowed to play at its most its optimal, capacity, makes that sound beautiful. Even if that one instrument is just a chime that has one note in the piece, it's important. And that's the same way with us. Everyone in the ensemble has a place. Um, I always contrast that with teams. You know, uh, in teams, everyone has a role, but it's, not everyone matters at any given time. The offense is on the field, the defense doesn't matter, because those are role activities. But the best teams are the ones that built the ensemble first. So that's what I kind of went in trying to do with teens at then again at that time in prevention. Um, so uh, what was interesting was during that time, I, was talking about somebody else's addiction for all these years. I was talking about Chris's, and I probably helped some people and doing improv, using him to showcase humor. But it wasn't until I got into recovery and started talking about my own issues that I really started to connect with people, and that was really powerful. About showing my authentic self, and humor had a lot to play in that. There was an interesting point when I first started at Rosecrans. We did a retreat for our alumni that have gone through our program. And I was asked to tell my story. And I was going to do that. I was going to be one of the last speakers on this day long thing. And early on, one of our clinicians was talking about trauma. And I'm like, well, I know what trauma was. Trauma is something bad happens, and now your life is going this way. Now it's over here. And she was like, yeah, that's kind of the big T concept. But she was talking about these little things um, that we collect as humans, these traumas that we don't know they're there. And she went deep into this kind of trauma. But by the time it got to me, about 45 minutes later, I had been like thinking about this. And the first, instead of going right into my story, I said, I got to process this. It's like, do you know what trauma was in the Farley family? The trauma was that I was realizing for the first time was that we had one emotion we used for everything. And obviously, you can imagine what that emotion was. It was humor. And we used it for everything. When somebody was stressed out, we laughed. When somebody was um, fell and hurt themselves, we laughed. Not to be mean or anything. We just didn't like their pain, so we thought we could bring them out of that with our humor. If somebody was angry, we laughed. If somebody was experiencing joy, we laughed, which isn't even the same thing. We couldn't go to the positive end of the emotional scale because our coping mechanism of humor kind of kept us in this safe place. Um, and that turned into a trauma. It turned into a trauma. And so once I realized that, um, and finding kind of humor's role in kind of just not just connection, but also in treatment and recovery. That was a whole new that just brought everything kind of home for me. So um, you go to wow, now I'm all over the place. Um, anyway, so um, I love that. What do we have now? Yeah, but yeah, so it really breaks down, the humor breaks down these complex emotional issues. What I love about humor in therapy or improv in therapy is that you can Roma, you can be a different character. There was a great story I read about in family therapy where they incorporated improv. And what's great about a lot of improv kind of is based on storytelling, and it has a conflict that you have to overcome. And so one therapist in a family that was working with a family where everyone thought the mom was bad. And so, all right, let's do this improv thing. And so we started, it's like, let's play out, what does that look like? Let's do something different. Like, and he said for the mom, like, Mom, I want you to play a character where you're the good mom. What does that look like? And they played out this scenario where this mom was the good mom. And afterwards, they went back to the family and said, well, what do you think? And a lot of the kids, a lot of the family members, like, well, I don't think she was really doing it right because the things she was, you know, acting the attribute that stuff she does anyway. That's she wasn't really doing what she was supposed to do, and it gave them an opportunity to say, well, okay, well then if that's really her, then maybe she isn't the bad mom. And this mom was playing this role that it's not me. I'm playing a character, and she was trying different, new behaviors, and some of them were new behaviors. Some of them were like things she had done all along, but they were kind of defined as like she was because the tone was wrong or whatever it was. But she really was at her core a wonderful a good mom. Um, but that was all brought out through this role playing and trying out new behaviors. So there's some really neat things you can do in therapy with improv. Um, go to the next slide. Yeah, so what are we on? Go to the next one. Yeah, so um, it's that connection, accepting others, communicating effectively, building trust. Building trust is the biggest one. That was amazing, and I always look back at my brother Chris, who, wherever he was, at least for most of his life, whether it was in high school, um, uh, in college at Marquette, Second City, Saturday Night Live, he always had this core group of friends around him. Um, this ensemble that accepted him, and he trusted them and allowed him to be his true self. And if he was kind of you know, if his jokes went overboard, his ensemble kind of managed him that way. It didn't judge him. Just he knew he had to back away from it. So ensembles are very important because that connection, knowing where you are, um, and not being judged. So yeah, that's really key. I couple of things I um want to just talk about with our humor, and what I learned about my own humor is it's very good connecting, but I think um uh a lot of times that you overuse it, and it's it becomes when you're like, either whether it's self-depreciating, or you use it to manage your own emotions. It has the opposite effect. As I said before, in my family, we used it to manage all of our emotions, and some of them weren't appropriate. Managing emotions were um, something that we had to really work on. And I realized that, and I'm sure it was true for Chris, that we could be in the middle of a crowded room, surrounded by people, making everyone laugh, center of attention, and not feel more isolated than if we were standing on the moon. And we thought, but we're making everyone laugh. That's a connection. But deep down inside, we knew it wasn't. We were just, making people laugh, but we were still in isolation because we had fear of people knowing our real selves, and we used humor to buffer that self-doubt. So yeah, so um where are we at? Keep going. Go to the next one. I talked a little bit about this, just humor with the individual and provider. Humor is, shared laughter is a great way to measure trust and lightheadedness. But as I said, it can go, it can also create a barrier. There was a great line that I think it was Maya Angelou said, to Oprah, in Oprah Winfrey, um, and I think Mark may have pointed this out to me, but she said only equals laugh with each other. If you're laughing at somebody or laughing at yourself, it's unequal, and it's not a connection. And I thought that was beautiful. And so um, the ability to connect through humor is very powerful. Um, and I think there is a great correlation between substance use and laughter. It has the same kind of effect on the dopamine creation. So that managing the emotion through substance use and laughter can have obviously a negative effect, a short-term effect. You think that it's helping out because it's creating this release of dopamine, but if you do it the right, sometimes humor improperly used is it's almost like self-medicating, and it was for our family, definitely. So it's learning how to manage that in the appropriate way, and I think therapists need to do that the same way, and you can really connect to people that way, really well. That's that downside, managing the wrong emotions at creating barriers. There was an interesting in my recovery journey. I had a conversation with one of my daughters a while ago, and we were talking about just kind of what life was like back in the day. And she said to me, "Dad, don't feel regretful or resentful, that you and mom got divorced and all that kind of stuff." And I said, honestly, I'm not, because recovery has allowed me to kind of connect to the right emotion, and I learned that through my work in humor, how I was using that as a trauma. I said, I know what resentment feels like. I know what anger feels like, um, as far as our family is concerned. Am I sad? Yes. But I'm applying the right emotion to that and how it feels. If I'm applying um, regret to that, that it isn't a true emotion, and it really isn't. Um, it makes me doesn't make me feel different, the right way. And so humor um, can have that negative effect. So applying the right humor to the right thing, and to the right emotion is very key. I think we see that a lot with frontline workers, um, military, healthcare workers, any person that is in some very kind of serious emotional work. And all of us, we do a lot of heavy emotional work. Um, we can use humor in a way that um, it masks, how we're feeling in a short-term way, just like when we self-medicate in other ways, but it doesn't last long, and it really hasn't cured how we're feeling. And so uh, I work with a lot of military, and we talk about this, the dark humor, and it has a short-term effect, but it's being used to manage some pretty intense emotions and experiences, trauma relating experiences. So humor can help, but the wrong type of humor uh, can have the opposite effect. So I think that's really key. Go to the next slide. So how do we incorporate humor properly? How do we as therapists, how do we use that? Um, uh, you know, Asking questions, what made you laugh today? Um, uh, Acknowledging a humor expressed, creating a levity journal. I love that one. Um, Spending time with people who make you laugh. Think about that one for a second. Again, going back to that quote, laughing with people, that equality thing. It's not people, you know, a lot of times we manage through laughter, some uncomfortable things. We laugh at things that aren't really funny, um, because we don't know how to manage that emotion. So finding people that truly make you laugh equally, that's important. I love this last thing, inventory of a sense of humor. In recovery, boy, we love our um, inventory of defects, which is important to our recovery. But this was something that was really interesting to me. It's like there's also a positive side to that. We have to work on our defects, absolutely, but an inventory of a sense of humor. Think about that. Um, what makes you laugh? Do you have, humor? And it can come in the smallest ways, and the simplest ways. Um, it can be extremely funny, or it can create, humor can create laughter. It can also create joy. It can create all sorts of positive emotions. So really tapping into your levels of a sense of humor. That's a great therapeutic tool to use. Assigning humor homework. I wish my teachers in high school had done that. I would have got A's. That would have been wonderful. Um, it's Yeah, I would come in the next day. Did you do your homework? No, but I watched Caddyshack. I don't know. And then see, mark teaching points with laughter and seeking feedback. Great stuff. So and the last thing I would say, the last kind of reminders, the last slide, um, laughter can be highly beneficial to both physical and mental health functioning, obviously. Balance between humor as a teaching tool, and underscoring the seriousness of work. There, again, therapists must be cautious introducing humor into a relationship from another culture and background. That's a really key one, because now we're exposed to all sorts of interesting cultures and backgrounds, and my humor has changed dramatically over the years when I started to understand I was in a global world, and there were, I was experiencing different cultures, different people, and my first step was understanding them, um, and not, assuming that we laugh at the same things. So that was key, and it also, by doing that, you're connecting. You're absolutely connecting. So, um, always, respecting the client, obviously, that self-depreciating humor. I had a clinician that I work with, when he had a client use self-depreciating humor in therapy, he would say, I really don't like it when you talk about my friend like that. Now, how beautiful is that? You know, it really connects, like, you are, I like this person that we've been talking about and I've gotten to know, and there is a connection there. So when you talk self-depreciatingly, self-depreciatingly about that person, yourself, that makes me feel, um, it been less than positive. So, not only are you hurting yourself, but you're hurting the people around you. Um, yeah, the last one. Yeah, you're not in a comedy club looking for an applause. Um, it was interesting. I spoke to the Department of Psychiatry at Marquette a couple weeks ago. That obviously my brother Chris and my brother Kevin both went to Marquette, and so they asked me to come to speak at one of their galas. And the first thing I said was, um, I told, I said, back in the day, I don't know if they still do it, but if you're in college and you had a school of dentistry, you could go to the school of dentistry and get your teeth cleaned by students, learning the task, and it was great. It was cheap, it was free, and here in Madison, in Wisconsin, we have a wonderful school of veterinary science, and I used to take my dogs for checkups, and being worked by people in the school, and it was great. It was wonderful. It was helping them, and it was good for me. So I said to this budding psychiatrist, I said, my parents sent you two of my brothers, to work on. You had 4 years with them. You could have educated, so many people just on those two alone. Um, uh, you missed your opportunity. No one laughed. Not a laugh. I was like, okay, that's the line. We're not making fun of our field. Okay. And I'm always learning that. I'm always learning that, I didn't make a connection there. So I had to figure something else out. I also recently I did a tour of recovery groups in Wisconsin prisons, and the first one I went to was Oshkosh, one of the biggest ones. And um, they gave me a tour, and the first place they went was like, this is our laundry room. It was the biggest in the state. We do not just our laundry room, but laundry for all the other prisons in the state. And I said, well, every prison movie I ever watched, like, this is the room where everything goes down. This is where all the stuff. No one laughed. And I'm like, okay, that's the line. We're not crossing that. You got to learn sometimes. You gotta be humble, and um, and just you know, it's always, humor is it's a roller coaster. But it can be very, uh it's wonderful to help manage emotions. Um, but it can have a dark side. And in my family, it's taken us a long time to figure out, how to appropriately use humor. Again, I I knew that humor was uh had developed into a trauma in our family. So I had to figure out how can I use it in my own recovery to connect with people, which is what I wanted all along, but also to manage my emotions properly. What are the right emotions? And so it's been a lifelong kind of learning process for me. And I love the topic. I love talking about these things. And so uh, I love that I can now work with people that have really studied it. Again, I'm this kind of lived experience with humor, and I now work in the treatment recovery field, and so I'm finding uses, but I'm finding how I have um, not used it in the proper ways so many times. I was asked on a podcast a couple years ago. Um, Somebody said, "Are you a better parent than your parents were before you?" And I thought that was a horrible question. But I said I wanted to be, I tried to be, but I was just given the um, playbook that my parents were given to them. And so I was that teasing father because I didn't like people's pain, and I became that. And so I remember the time when one of my daughters came to me once when she was quite young and said, "Dad, I'm afraid of the dark." And my response was, well, frankly, I would be too if I had that under my bed. you know, Funny stuff. Great to see it would get a laugh in any comedy club, but it didn't really help her with her trauma. And um, uh, I had to build that up over years. The wonderful thing is I'm always that parent. I can always show them a different side of me, and I've learned that in recovery. But um, that use of humor damaged kind of that trust that she had of me, and it took a long time to build that back up. We still have just we laugh and do all sorts of stuff, but there were times when I used my humor that didn't wasn't very helpful, and so I it took a long time um, to overcome that. And the thing that overcame that and built that trust back up, it wasn't humor. It was all these other emotions that she needed me to show her. Humor was still a big part of it, of our relationship, but I had to develop other things beyond humor because in my family, all we had was humor, and that was, you know, um, that didn't create the connection that that family should have. So it was a great learning experience. So yeah, so that's a great kind of launch into a little deeper look that Mark's going to give us. But we'll I'll be back with you and talk a little further about this where we are now. So thank you so much for.
And thank you, Tom. Thank you, Alyssa and Jen, for hosting the event. And good morning, everyone. When Muhammad Ali was in the prime of his career as a boxer, he was invited to a home with people living with Alzheimer's to cheer him up. So Ali walked into a room. There were 20 people in that room living with Alzheimer's, and Ali said, "The champ is here. I'm the greatest of all time. Don't you recognize me?" Not one person in that room recognized Muhammad Ali. He walked into a second room. There were 20 people in that room living with Alzheimer's, and Ali said, "The champ is here. I'm the greatest of all time. Don't you recognize me?" Not one person in that room recognized Muhammad Ali. He walked into a third room. There was an 85-year-old man sitting in a room by himself, staring out of the window. And Ali went up to him and said, "The champ is here. I'm the greatest of all time. Don't you recognize me?" And the 85-year-old man didn't recognize Muhammad Ali. And as Ali was leaving with his entourage, the 85-year-old man said, "Hey, champ, I recognize you. You're my boyhood hero. All my life I wanted to meet you, champ. Finally, my boyhood dream has come true. You're the greatest of all time. Joe Louis. And Bundy Brown ran to 85-year-old man and said, that's not flat-footed Joe Louis. That's Muhammad Ali. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Now Ali said, cool it, man, cool it. Didn't you hear what he said? He said his boyhood dream was to meet his hero. He said, never kill a person's dreams. Alcoholism kills dreams. Methamphetamine dependence kills dreams. Depression kills dreams. Schizophrenia kills dreams. Homelessness, poverty kills dreams. And you are the individuals, those with us today, who encourage the clients that you serve to dream about what's possible for them in recovery. So would you join me in giving your colleagues, coworkers, a round of applause for all that they do to promote recovery? We'll take a moment, if we could, and give them just a virtual round of applause. Thank you all so very much for all that you do. Now, conferences, presentations often begin with the polling of an audience. So by show of hands, how many do outstanding work? Would you raise your hand if you do really good work? Okay, very good. How many of you feel, as a result of the work that you do, that you're making a difference in the lives of at least one human being, at least one person benefits from your work? Raise your hand. And how many of you feel, as a result of the work that you do, that you deserve a $95,000 a year pay increase? Every hand goes up twice. Know that the world cannot compensate you enough for the important work that you do. So I bring to you a gift in the form of a story in honor of the work that you do. In 1983, I had a job where I earned lots of money, $13,000 a year. I decided to go back to school so I could learn more, but also so I could make more money. So in order to do that, I went from take an evening job. I went from earning $13,000 a year to $10,000 a year. I don't know if you know what a $10,000 a year paycheck looks like. Some of you are saying, yeah, I do. It's about $300 every 2 weeks. And I was given $150 of those dollars to the school I attended, Loyola University of Chicago, and $125 to my roommate, leaving me $25 every 2 weeks for ramen noodles. And the school I attended, I did an internship or practicum. And my first practicum was at a hospital. And the first day I showed up to work, I was asked to go home because I was wearing gym shoes. They said, this is a professional hospital. We don't wear gym shoes here. So where was I going to get a pair of dress shoes for $25? You're thinking Goodwill, Salvation Army. Years ago, there was a discount shoe chain called Favor Shoes. And the only shoes I could afford for $25 were plastic. The problem was that it was September, and it rains a lot in September. So I quickly discovered that plastic and rain don't mix. I was slipping and sliding all over the place. And right around November, I had a larger concern. A hole formed right at the tip of my shoe. You ever had a hole in your shoe? I'm walking, my shoes are talking. December, I'm scared. Because as you know, in the Midwest, it snows a lot in December. So my fear was that my snow would get in the tip of my shoe and I would die of frostbite. So I took my shoe to the nearest shoe shop. The owner looked at my shoe and said, you may as well throw these away, pal. These are plastic. We don't fix plastic. It's not worth it. He said, plastic can't be fixed. I put my head down, I walk a mile, I stumble to another shoe shop. I sit the shoe on the counter. The owner looked at my shoe and he frowned and said, you may as well throw these away, son. These are plastic. We don't fix plastic. It's not worth it, he said. Plastic can't be fixed. Now I'm desperate. I walk about 2 miles, stumble to another shoe shop. I sit the shoe on the counter. My heart's beating so fast. I knew he was going to say, we don't fix plastic. Plastic can't be fixed. Instead, he said nothing. He reached back, picked up a magnifying glass, looked at my shoe really up close, looked at me and smiled and said, I'll fix it. And that was 1983. This is the year 2024. He's been fixing my shoes for 41 years. Not the same pair, but he fixed those 4 times that year. What he said to me is it takes a special person to work at fixing something that the rest of the world says is not worth it. They can't be fixed. That's the same thing a lot of people say about the clients you serve. It's not worth it. They can't be fixed. And it takes special people like you to do this work, in spite of what people say about the clients that you serve. So my part of the presentation, before I turn it back over to Tom, is the therapeutic benefits of humor and substance use disorders and mental health treatment and counseling, a focus on self-care and rapport building. You know, comedian Steve Allen said that comedy is tragedy plus time. In order for something to be funny, it usually comes out of pain, and it's not funny at first, but as time goes on, you can heal from it and find the laughter in it. I get that up close. I come from a family of lots of pain. Both of my grandfathers had alcoholism. My great-grandfather had alcoholism. In fact, if you were in the room with me, you'd notice on the left side of my face, I have a little dot on my face. Can you see that little dot on my face? It's been with me since I was 2 years old, that little dot on my face right there. My mother told me that one day when I was 2 years old, I was left in the care of my grandfather who went to the bar to get something to drink. And he left me on the kitchen floor, and there was a bottle of Drano that didn't have a lid on it. My mother told me that I drank the Drano, and that little dot on my face is caused by having drunk the Drano. So I'm from one of those families that starts a story, but they rarely finish the story. Kids around, they get really quiet. So over the years, I've been left to fill in the blank. So here's my fantasy. I drank the Drano, and the Drano left this little dot on my face. It was about to leave dots all over my face, but the doctors pumped my stomach and saved my life so I could speak with you today. I have a good friend I went to high school and college with. About 6 years ago, said, Mark, we need to join a health club together. We're not getting any younger. In fact, we're old. Let's take care of our bodies. I said, are you kidding? My body's fine. You know, when I was 2 years old, I swallowed Drano. And the only sign I swallowed a Drano was this little dot on my face. He asked me $1 million question. He said, the dot is the only sign you swallowed the Drano. He said, how do you know your body's not green inside? I said, I took 2 steps back and said, I don't know, but I do know is I've never been clogged up. There's the good news. Where would we be without humor? We owe a great deal of gratitude to a man by the name of Norman Cousins. And Norman Cousins was suffering from a debilitating illness of his immune system. He was in pain 24 hours a day. And doctors told him he wouldn't be alive long. You know how doctors, they act like they can predict the hour? And Norman Cousins says to his doctors, you're not God. Get me out of this hospital. And they asked him if he wanted any medicine. And Norman Cousins said, yeah, give me comedy tapes. He figured that negative emotions like rage causes medical complications. So he believed that positive experiences like humor, like laughter, could heal him. So he laughed every waking moment looking at comedy tapes. And what he learned is that for every 10 minutes he laughed, he had 2 hours of pain-free sleep. He actually lived 16 years longer than doctors predicted and wrote a book called The Anatomy of an Illness, How Laughter Healed Us. So my task in a little bit of time is about laughter and mental health, beginning with self-care. Let's face it, if you burn out, you can't be as effective as a clinician in the work that we do. So by show of hands, how many of you have ever experienced burnout? Raise your hand if you've ever experienced burnout. Some of you are saying, I'm so burned out, I can barely raise my hand. I get that, you know. So burnout in helping relationships has been called emotional exhaustion. And it's caused by organizational stress and feeling ineffective in our work. Compassion fatigue is caused by absorbing clients' traumatic experiences. Did you know that helping professionals, according to John Briere from USC, that we experience more trauma in childhood than any other profession? That means a couple of things. One, when our clients share stories of their pain, their trauma, we can wind up carrying it home with us. Compassion fatigue also goes by the names of secondary trauma, secondary PTSD, and there's good news. My mentor, historian William White, did a research study on helping professionals who have the most resilience, the most resistance against burnout and compassion fatigue. And what they found is that those of you who have the most resistance to burnout and compassion fatigue, there are 4 things you do on a regular basis that protect you. Here they are. The #1 research finding is those of you who have the most resilience against burnout and compassion fatigue, you laugh more than your colleagues at home and at work. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever experienced so much stress that all you can do is laugh? I'm serious. You ever had so much stress in your life that all you can do is laugh? I had a relative call me, told me he was $250,000 in debt. He was laughing like a hyena. Said, why are you laughing? Sometimes things hurt so bad that all you can do is laugh. Comedian Joan Rivers said to laugh as God gets a human, you never see a cow laugh. By show of hands, how many of you have kids? Did you raise your hand if you have kids? February 3rd, 1995. February 3rd, 1995. was the scariest and happiest day of my life, all wrapped up in one, if you can imagine such a day. It was the day my son was born. He came out weighing 5 pounds, 5 ounces, looking exactly like his dad, scared me to death. Specifically, what I'm saying is this. My son was born with a frame this big, a body this big. He had my nose, my adult nose, on a body this big. He was all nose. Looked like everywhere I walked around the hospital room, his nose was following me. You'd have thought his nose had eyes. Then I wondered why nobody ever told me the second my son was born. I had more love for him than people I know my entire life. So strong was my love for my son that everywhere the nurses took him, I followed him. My fear was that my son would get mixed up with someone else's son, and someone was wanting to bring a future Michael Jordan home. I'm only playing. I had therapy about that. So in the hospital where my son was born, most of the babies were born weighing between 5 to 8 pounds at birth, and they were sleeping in a fetal position. There was one baby there I never will forget. That baby was born weighing 12 pounds, sleeping like this, looked like a grown man, like he's ready to give me a pillow, some popcorn, and put the TV on channel 7. He was huge. We brought our son home. And after a while, he learned to smile. And then eventually he learned to laugh. And because I loved him so, I would laugh with him. The catch is nothing was funny, I felt, but I thought I was losing it. Then I heard on Nightline that the fastest growing movement in India are laughing clinics. There are these people who are clinically depressed. They show up every evening in the town square. They do 15 minutes of yoga stretching, and then they laugh for 45 minutes. Nothing is funny. They sleep better, they eat better, they need less medication. In short, the research says there's a value in laughing, even if nothing is funny. So I know your work is stressful, but here's what I encourage you to do for the rest of your career. Every evening when you get off work, I'm talking to the therapists, the counselors, the case managers, the recovery coaches. Every evening when you get off work, I want you to go to the parking lot, get in your car, lock the door, look around in both directions, make sure no one is watching, and simply laugh. Laughter is the best medicine for burnout and compassion fatigue. Those of you who have the most resilience against burnout and compassion fatigue, you're more likely to engage in what's called centering rituals. You do something every day to center yourself. Prayer, meditation, a quiet time. You do something every day to center yourself. The third finding is those of you who have the most resilience against burnout and compassion fatigue, you're more likely to get together with like-minded, positive people over lunch, over coffee, over dinner, and you recharge each other's battery. Now, the fourth finding is counterintuitive. The researchers did not expect to find this. Those of you most protected against burnout and compassion fatigue are more likely to engage in what's called meaningful acts of service, volunteerism. Meaningful, non-traumatic volunteerism. And what volunteerism does, it helps to recharge your battery. Non-traumatic volunteerism. It helps to recharge your battery, that it reminds you why you decided to be a helping professional in the first place. And then I'm adding the fifth factor, a best friend at work. Where would we be without friendship at work? Incredible story about this American soldier who was stationed in Afghanistan. She flew home to New Jersey to get married, and then she flew back to Afghanistan, and she lost her hand in battle. Her best friend is in the military, right? Went back on the battlefield and found her hand. So they can give her back that wedding band that was lodged on her finger. Research says, when you have a best friend at work, you have greater job satisfaction. You're happier, especially you make each other laugh, right? And it's a protective factor against burnout and compassion fatigue. The magical 4 words. Let's go to lunch with your friends at work. Laughter and mental health. Humor raises endorphin levels in the brain and reduces emotional pain. So here's the story. About 20 years ago, I was invited to the Commonwealth of the United States, called the U.S. Virgin Islands. You ever been there? It's so beautiful in the Virgin Islands. I said to God, if I don't get to heaven, you could just send me to the Virgin Islands. The palm trees, the ocean. It was so beautiful. I was invited to the Virgin Islands to speak to a group of high school students that were cutting class, smoking marijuana cigarettes about the size of trees. They were getting high. I gave the speech. Say no to drugs. I did say more than that. Then they asked me, would you like to take a cruise on the Atlantic Ocean? So take the cruise on the ocean. And sun was setting. The sky looked so beautiful. I said, God, is heaven as beautiful as this? When I returned from the cruise, the red light on the hotel room was blinking. And I called the lobby to say, call home as an emergency, your wife called. And I called my wife. And she told me that our 6-year-old son, at that time our only child, had just died. And I went from what felt like heaven to what felt like hell. I didn't think I could ever do my work again, because my work is about my heart. I thought I would just stay on the island. I'm from a drinking family, just get drunk all the time. But then I remembered I was a drug counselor. We used to teach our clients to play the tape forward. You can get drunk every night. At the end of the day, when your son is no longer with us on earth. I was bitter in my heart. Eventually, I came home and started watching the news. Have you ever noticed how negative the news is? So here's what I did. This is what I did. For 2 years after my son died, I turned off the news every night and I watched the Comedy Channel. For 2 years. No news, comedy. And I promise you, I couldn't belly laugh at first, but I could chuckle. Laughter is what got me back. As a matter of fact, if you said to me, Mark, give me your intelligence, everything you know, give me your sense of humor. I said, give me a library card and give me a gift card to give to Amazon. I can buy some books. Take what I know. Because if you can laugh, Viktor Frankl called laughter one of the last of the human freedom. You can make it do all kind of stuff. It's amazing. It's also believed that humor activates neurochemicals in the brain, such as dopamine, and acts as an antidepressant. The emergence of a sense of humor is one sign of mental health and progress in therapy. In other words, the sweetest sound to my ears is when you're leading a group of clients living with mental illness or substance use disorders, and they are laughing in that room. It means they're healing. That's how we know. When they can laugh at stuff that was killing them before. A sign that you enjoy life is a good sense of humor. That quote, my friends, is from my big sister. Where would the world be without big sisters? Vanessa Sanders. She married a man named Greg Williams. Her name became Vanessa Williams. When her name was Vanessa Williams, she was in sales. Here's what I can tell you. When she was Vanessa Williams in sales, when she would tell somebody, tell them that Vanessa Williams called, she'd get the quickest call back. At that time, Vanessa Williams, right, was Miss America. Tell them Vanessa Williams called, right? And then she became Church. She didn't drop that Williams, Vanessa Williams Church. Any big sisters with us today? When I think of my big sister, I feel like what I heard Dolly Parton say. As long as I've got a dime, she's got a nickel. Our big sisters are like second mothers, right? And the research says that oldest siblings in families have a tendency towards perfection. So she was perfect, right? And me and my siblings, you all will interpret this well. We didn't get enough mothering because our mother didn't get enough father. We didn't get enough mothering because our mother didn't get enough father. My mother was her father's favorite, but he was so drunk. He was so intoxicated. You ever meet somebody you smell alcohol coming out of their pores? He couldn't give her what she needed. So she was man crazy. So my big sister raised us. She never had a childhood. She was perfect. And you know what she did? She left corporate America in the 90s and got a job at a comedy store downtown Chicago called All Jokes Aside. And my big sister was one of the booking agents of these comics I'm about to mention to you before they became famous. I met them before they were famous. Bernie Mac, Steve Harvey, Cedric the Entertainer, right? She would book them gigs. And it was amazing to watch my big sister laugh. A good sense of humor is one aspect of self-actualization. You know what Maslow said? If you want to be a better therapist, strive to reach your potential. And in so doing, you have a better sense of humor. So let's talk about humor and the work that we do with clients. As Tom mentioned, it's the great equalizer. It levels the playing field. Equals laugh with each other. It can bring the ideal helper back to life. They see you as up here, they're down here, right? And then you laugh. She's human. He's human. It can reduce resistance. You know, Maya Angelou also said to Oprah Winfrey, because many of our clients come in resistant to change. Maya Angelou said to Oprah Winfrey, the shortest distance between two people is a good laugh. And I'm imagining that many of you do cross-cultural counseling. She also told Oprah that it's impossible to laugh and hate at the same time. I speak in prisons for free. And once I was at a prison speaking, and they told me those men up there on the right, they're members of the KKK. I said, but they were laughing while you were talking. It's impossible to hate and laugh at the same time. It brings people together cross-culturally. It can facilitate bonding. Laughter facilitates self-disclosure. Did you know that when a client laughs with you, they'll share more with you? It allows relief from emotional and physical pain. It allows clients to change how they view a situation. It can ease some of the anxiety caused by talking about taboo subjects. It can provide insight, decrease stress and anxiety, makes the time fly. You ever had a client walk in your office and look at their watch and say, what time is this over? This is boring. We haven't even started yet. Laughter and individual and group therapy makes time fly. Did you know that when clients laugh with you, they'll make more eye contact with you? A sign that they're starting to trust you. It decreases stigma. It helps individuals cope with loss. Laughter is contagious. It can facilitate bonding in group therapy and improve marriages and partnerships. How many by show of hands are married? You know what they told me? They told me it's the first 100 years of marriage that are most difficult. I like what comics have to say about marriage. You know, Robin Harris weighed in. He said, someone asked me why I wear my wedding ring on the wrong hand. It's because I married the wrong person. You know who weighed in was Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States, said, marriage is not heaven, it's not hell, it's purgatory. On that Abe Lincoln quote, let me chat with you. How do you use humor in your work with clients? You can put your response in the chat. I'm curious what you do. And bring us together. What do you do? Sometimes the first person is a little nervous to chat. Let's hear from the second person. How do you use humor in your work with clients? And what do you see there, Jen?
People are saying I make fun of myself,
Yeah.
break the ice, to build rapport quicker. In our community and culture, humor is common. It's more uncommon to not connect with humor. I use my Forrest Gump expression
How about that?
to build rapport, sometimes sarcasm.
Anyone else? What do you do? I shall add to your list. Art can be funny, but here's the secret. You see, I've been a certified addictions counselor for 43 years. I had a lot of clients, done a lot of research, a lot of reading. And I believe at the core addiction are one of three things. Either a tendency towards or childhood abandonment, childhood trauma, or a tendency toward perfection. How many by show of hands come from families? Now, my family, that's my way of making sure you're still with us. My family had so many secrets, traumatic secrets, right? That when I was a kid growing up, if you brought home 8 A's on your report card and 1 B, they wouldn't say it's wonderful that you got those 8 A's on your report card. What would they say? Why'd you get that B? And you got that you had to be perfect. By the way, do you know what alcohol and drugs do for teenagers who've gotten the message they have to be perfect? When you're high, when you're drunk, you don't have to be so perfect. But art can tell all kinds of stories, right? People can tell their whole life story through art. And art can make people laugh. But at the same time, people are sensitive to their drawings. So my art teacher taught me a method called the scribble method. where you just scribble something on a piece of paper. I just did a quick scribble. Let me add some red to it. And you just scribble it, something on a piece of paper, right? And then she said, I'll take that scribble and turn it into something beautiful. And we'd all the students show our art, and it would make us laugh. Role plays, here's an exercise. So our clients who are in early recovery are offered drugs all the time, right? So what we could do is rehearse with them high-risk situations, kind of like improv that Tom talked about. So here's what I do. I teach our clients the difference between passive refusal skills, aggressive refusal skills, and assertive skills. Saying no to drugs. Passive, aggressive, and assertive, right? And what we want our clients to be able to do is to refuse offers to use drugs in an assertive manner. So after teaching those three, the difference between those three ways of saying no, refusing drugs, then we might have them pick two people to play their parents. And their parents is asking them to go get them something to drink, and they just came out of treatment. So how would you assertively get out of that situation? Next, we want you to pick three people to play the roles of your friends. You're headed to an AA meeting, and these three friends in the group are going to approach you and invite you to get high instead of going to the AA meeting. How are you going to assertively get out of that situation? Those two are easy. Then I ask, pick somebody to play your partner or your ex. And how would you assertively get out of that situation that they're offering you to get high for old time's sake? That's a little tougher. Skits can be funny and yet teach lessons. Sharing stories, making fun of yourself, as someone said. If you surround your office with humor tools, movie clips, cartoons, anecdotes, signs, prompts, masks, people see that you have a sense of humor, it lightens the moment. One of my favorite activities is what I call an auction. I give every group member 150 play dollars, Monopoly money. And they get to bid on these different values. There are about 33 things they can purchase as group members. Like to be president of the United States, peace of mind, a good pair of shoes, to smoke marijuana with no consequences, a gold mine, use heroin with no consequences, a new car, on and on and on and on and on. Things that they can purchase. Each item they purchase is on a 5x7 index card. And then we talk about it. So what we've learned is that it's a way that people, members can share with each other, right? They can also communicate their values. Why do you want to be the president? What would you do in the role of a president, right? If you had a gold mine, what would you spend the money on? And what's interesting is the clients we work with really do buy values like to smoke marijuana with no consequences, to use heroin with no consequences, to be chauffeured to 12-step group meetings. So we're able to process, is that really possible? To smoke marijuana without consequences, to drink alcohol without consequences, use heroin without consequences. So it's therapeutic, it makes people laugh, it bonds groups, and it's fun. 6 types of inappropriate humor. Laughing at clients, cheap shots, put downs, racist and sexist jokes. And when there's not enough distance from the crisis, as Joan Rivers would say, too soon, too soon. Did you know that kids laugh about 20 times more per day than adults? Kids laugh a lot. And sometimes what we need to do to put more humor in our life is to remember when we were a kid. Let us talk. When you were a kid, what was your favorite game? You can put that in chat. We'll give you a second to put your favorite game and then your favorite food. And who was your favorite cartoon character? Mine was Speedy Gonzalez. Underlay. I wanted to be fast, Tom, like Speedy Gonzalez, right? What was your favorite song? I'm going to tell you how old I am. Mine was Zippity Doo-Dah. If you tell me your favorite song was a Britney Spears song, I know you were born just yesterday. But I go way back. What was your favorite holiday? Any responses there, Jen? I imagine these responses are all over.
Yes, so many. For games, I'm seeing Monopoly and Nintendo, Sorry or Trouble. Monopoly again, Life, some food is mac and cheese, pizza.
Oh, how about that? You ever
and-
like bite a slice of pizza New York style and just watch the cheese? That alone is just funny.
Yep, I'm seeing card games, tic-tac-toe, ghost in the graveyard, mac and cheese.
Tic-tac-toe. Before video games, tic-tac-toe. Very good. Thank you, Jen. So Norman Cousins was asked, what else do people need along with laughter in order to have wellness? And the first thing Norman Cousins says is everybody needs love. Here's the story. As I'm winding down, I'll turn things over to Tom really soon. You know, I share stories. So people stay at the end of my seminars and they share stories with me. So a woman told me the following story. That she and her husband had a baby. And she asked her husband to go home to bring her some clean clothes so that she could wear clean clothes home from the hospital. Her husband was gone for 2 days. His sister showed up and said when her husband went home, there were men robbing the house. He went and got the family gun and held these men at gunpoint and called the police. She said when the police showed up and saw her husband holding a gun, the police didn't know if her husband was the good guy or the bad guy. So the Chicago police accidentally shot and killed her husband. And this woman was received the largest settlement in Illinois history, wrongful death, police killing her husband. Said, Mark, I was in the courtroom and the judge opened his mouth and the judge said you were received. She said before the judge finished the sentence, there was a woman in the back of the courtroom who stood up and said, wait a minute, Your Honor. He's not her husband. I married the man first, we never divorced. The second woman received the settlement. Now, the woman who told me the story, before she got the news of betrayal from her husband, she was a really good probation officer. Something like 35% of her caseload went back to prison. The national average is half. But after she got the news of betrayal from her husband, he never divorced his first wife, she was so bitter in her heart. Her numbers swelled from 35% going back to prison to 65%. Do you believe you can have some experiences that can affect your heart and affect your work? One day she was at home bitter. And there was a ringing at her doorbell. She said there was a 13-year-old girl standing there. And the 13-year-old girl said, the woman who won this settlement is my mother. The man who you married is my biological father. The girl told her right before her mother received a settlement check, the state went in, did a background check, found out her mother had been receiving public assistance illegally forever, a felony in all 50 states. They put her mother in prison. The girl said when she got out of prison, she started using drugs. She neglected me. I haven't been going to school. I've been smoking marijuana. Can I live with you? Can I live with you? She said, Mark, against the recommendation of all my family and friends, I told that 13-year-old girl, you can live with me. So I mothered that girl. I mothered her. Love brought me back and then brought her back too. She's not a college student. Love is the most magical thing, the most powerful aspect of recovery. It's love. That is why we connect people with people that they love. Those of you doing evidence-based practices, those that you do the work with love will get the better results. Norman Cousins says we all need at least one person in our life who loves us unconditionally to have wellness. We need hope. We need hope. And as you know, sometimes the clients we serve come in lacking hope, and they can borrow some of your hope. You see possibilities when no one else can see those possibilities. They need faith, a belief that things can get better. They can borrow that faith from you so they can have their own faith. Human beings need touch. Do you know what people in 12-step circles missed most during COVID-19? They had virtual groups. They miss hugs. How many of you, by show of hands, receive 12 hugs a day? Anybody here to receive 12 hugs a day? If you get 12 hugs a day, who do you get those from? Put that in chat. I'm curious. Who gets 12 hugs a day? We see some thumbs. Who do they get those from, Jen?
Their children, their babies, co-workers.
Jen, you know what I noticed over the years when I ask people about 12 hugs a day? No one ever says their spouse. Anybody get hugs from your spouse? Raise your hand if you get hugs from your spouse. Anybody get hugs from your spouse? My wife can't stand me. I told my wife last week I'll be gone 2 days. She said, stay 3. Anybody here get 8 hugs a day? 8 hugs a day. We see some thumbs up. Anybody get 4 hugs a day? At least 4. I get one hug a day. I hug myself at least once a day. Here's the good news. It gets better. At my son's funeral, 250 certified alcohol and drug abuse counselors showed up. And we are one hugging profession. I hugged 250 drug counselors at my son's funeral. You ever hug 250 people? You ever hug 250 people? It nearly killed me, but it breathed life into me. And we did the unthinkable. After all those hugs, we had another child. He's 21 years old in college. That wouldn't have happened without that love. We need creativity in our lives and good nutrition. And Norman Cousins said, we all need goals and a sense of purpose. You ever notice that people sometimes retire and die? William White said, we need to have our what next answer before we retire. We need to have goals. Helps prolong life. So how many of you have ever gone to Vegas? Okay, you've earned your way there because you do a lot of paperwork. You've earned a trip to Vegas, all that paperwork. You know, I used to bring mine home with me. Then one day I stopped. I became convinced if I died a social worker tomorrow, I'd have at least one form to fill out before I died. If nothing else, a discharge summary. I stopped bringing it home. I'd love to send the three of you all to Vegas who've never been there. Vegas is living proof of what a criminal can do if you give them a chance. Right there in the desert, Bugsy Siegel founded Las Vegas. I went 12 years in a row. But you know what I noticed? No matter how beautiful the place, after about 4 days, you're ready to get home and sleep in your own bed. Last time I was in Vegas, I'm at the airport. I can't wait to get home. I want to sleep in my own bed. And then the announcement came over the loudspeaker at the airport. Your plane to Chicago has been delayed. I'm angry. My plane is delayed. But rather than focus on my anger while I waited for the next plane, I played the slot machines at the airport. I won $1.7 million at the Vegas airport. I'm only kidding. I don't gamble. I don't like the odds. I'm like Bobby Womack, who said, if I ever get my hands on the dollar again, I'm going to hold on to the eagle grins. My next stop was to a small town called Galena, Illinois. No roulette wheels, no traffic in Galena, just me and my thoughts, crickets and stars. I came back from that small town, relaxed and replenished, ready to take on the world. Norman Vincent Peale said that busy people like you, the best people in the world, because every day you wake up, you make the world a better place. Norman Vincent Peale said that busy people like you who help others for a living, he says it's mandatory for you to spend at least 15 minutes alone each day just to replenish yourself. And you have that much more to offer the world. Dale Carnegie said, if he had 10 hours of work to do and 5 hours to do it, the first thing he would do is take a 15-minute break. So my encouragement to you as I pass it over to Tom is to take a break every day and laugh every day. And once a week, hold your head up high. And they're going to see you with your head up high. They're going to say, look at her. She thinks she's a gift to the world. He thinks he's God's gift to the world. And you know what you are. You've been given the gift of empathy and compassion. And you're using those gifts to make the world a better place. Thank you so much for listening and participating. I'll pass it over to Tom.
Oh, thank you so much. I could listen to you forever. Thank you, Mark. That was fantastic. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's being called the epidemic of loneliness. It's funny. This first slide has a typo. It says the epidemic of loneliness and humor. And what I'm hoping is that after this, that we are all going to create an epidemic of humor. So I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep that. So it's funny. I talked a little bit before this with some of the moderators and Mark, and what I talked about was going back to this managing your emotions. When I started doing this, going out and speaking in schools and to groups, 25 years ago, I learned an important lesson, which is that it is absolutely true that one of the biggest fears that adults have, certainly, is a fear of public speaking, because it's just not natural to stand in front of an audience. I'm glad you're all virtual today, but normally I am in a group. And it's just not a natural thing. And so, but now when I go out and do a talk or a speech or a keynote, 5 minutes, 10 minutes before, I am kind of all in my head, like, what am I going to say? But as soon as I walk out, lights are in my face, I have a microphone in my hand, I see faces looking at me, I am overcome by this feeling of I am so comfortable with this, even though this is a comfortable, uncomfortable, always going to be uncomfortable situation. So I've embraced this concept of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, which is wonderful because that's what life is. That's what I learned in life. I was always running from the uncomfortable things, but public speaking has taught me that sometimes you have to lean into it and you have to be uncomfortable, be comfortable being uncomfortable. And what I learned also is that humor, properly applied, can and definitely help this. But it also, as we've talked before, can be a coping mechanism that shields you from this fear. So I've used humor to make this uncomfortable act a little bit more comfortable for me because I'm used to it. And what I say, in recovery, I say this all the time, is that recovery is just on the other side of fear. Fear blocks us. Fear and self-doubt takes us, keeps us from connecting. And so I really embrace that I need to overcome it. Yeah, I know there will always be fear. So I know that all these great things are, and connection and recovery are on the other side of that fear. And humor is one of those things that I use to help me get over that fear. Again, properly applied. So it brings me to this amazing study that came out last year by the Surgeon General. And of all the Surgeon General reports, this is probably one of my favorites. I'm kidding. I don't read Surgeon General reports. But I read this one. And it was called the Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. And it was very thorough, very amazing. I encourage you all to seek it out and download it. But it basically says, that that we've, especially after COVID, that we've had this isolating, in so many factors. And it's I don't want to throw any one of them under the bus, social media, but a lot of things kind of are a part of that. But it really says that there is this lack of social connection, which poses a significant risk for individual health. At one point, they even pointed out that social connection says can increase the risk, lacking social connection rather, can increase risk for premature death as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Think about that. That lacking that social connection has that sort of effect of smoking that much a day. So they went through this whole thing. Basically, they said there's three, to not to get too deep into the weeds in this thing, but it really outlined three vital components of social connection. And they talked about structure, function, and quality. Structure, meaning the number and variety of relationships and frequency of interactions. So household size, friend circles, marital partnership status, things like that. That's structure. Then you've got function, the degree in which relationships serve various needs. So emotional support, mentorship, support in a crisis. That's great function of connection. And then quality, obviously, is the last thing, which is the positive and negative aspects of relationships and interactions. So how satisfied are you with relationships? What sort of strains do your current relationships have? And then social inclusion versus exclusion. So that's as deep as I'm going to get into what the Surgeon General writes about. But what was really what I took from this is that there is a strong need for this feeling of belonging. We desire that so much. I had an interesting experience before I took this job. I worked briefly in when COVID started for my local United Way of Dane County, and doing this. I love my community. Was doing this great community nonprofit work. I thought this was fantastic. So in the middle of it, we as an organization sponsored an event that was called the Racial Justice Summit, and uh, as a sponsor, we got to attend. It was a 3-day thing that the YWCA here in Madison, Wisconsin, put on, and it was kind of that summer of 2020 when there was a lot of stuff going on, and I wanted to really lean into this and understand it, and so I just told myself, just show up and shut up and listen and maybe hopefully learn something, and I did. It was amazing. But what was really amazing was the first day, the last speaker said, I'm going to send you home with homework. I want you to go home and identify where in your life do you feel deep belonging. And I knew where he was coming from. He wanted us to get in touch. There are some people in our communities that never feel that sense of deep belonging, and never been given the opportunity to feel that they belong in our own communities. And he wanted us to get in touch with that. So he sent us home with this homework, and I went home and I'm like, where do I feel deep belonging? Okay, well, I went down the list. Is it my family? Unfortunately, no, not really. I mean, we love each other, and we have a a deep DNA connection. And life experience. But no, it's we're all kind of doing our no, it's not a sense of belonging. We all kind of struggle in our own little levels of isolation. So is it, it wasn't that, was it my work? I was working for United Way for my community. I loved it. I loved the nonprofit work. I love the people I worked with. It was interesting. I never met them. Everything was virtual. It was that first virtual thing. My whole team, we would meet all the time, but it was through Zoom. But I was connected. I loved them all. We did great work. But that wasn't a sense of belonging. Was it, where I went to college? I just went to my, reunion, last weekend in DC, and I loved the place. I love the people, but no, it wasn't real connection. Is it, is it my faith? No, yeah, I'm Catholic. We have our issues. We're working on it, but give us time, but it's not, sometimes I feel connected and belonging, sometimes I don't, but it's so, you would think that would be a natural. No, the only thing I could come up with 100% connection was my recovery community, where I could go into, and as much as I was looking forward to my reunion last week, I was almost looking more forward to this Saturday's 7 a.m. meeting that I had found years ago, that every time I go to DC, I go there. So I know I belong there. Is this my best friends in the world, or there's people I have all this stuff in common? No, but I have this sense of belonging with wherever. So I really understood that need for the sense of belonging, and certainly, you know, that's something this report really kind of emphasized, this need to do that. And it talks about companies, particularly when it talks about the company side of things. It talked about all sorts of aspects of our lives, but on the company side, it talks about companies needing to embrace the whole person. Early on in my career, there was all sorts of talk about work-life balance. And we thought that was a pretty good concept. You're at work, and you were this person, and now you're home and you need to be this person. You got to find a balance between the two. But that's really not, achievable when you think that you're still one person. That work-life balance, kind of forced you into this, I'm two different people. And sometimes one thing didn't equate to the other. That balance was either off balance, you worked too hard, or you were too focused on family or whatever, your other life too hard, or you were a different person in the wrong place. So that work-life balance thing just doesn't make sense in the scheme of this connective belonging kind of thing. And companies need to really kind of really embrace that thing. Mark talked about that fifth factor, best friend at work. How was that ever achievable in this old concept of you're this person here, that person there? Are you a friend to that person at work, just in your work persona personality? But then if you met that person on the street, would that be a different relationship? How does that work? That fifth factor really only works in this concept of embracing the whole person. I love that. Now that seems achievable if those environments allow you to be that whole person. So how do we do that? How do we do that? And again, going back to the workplace environment, it's what are the things they do, and it really spells out all of these things that companies and people can do, and a few of the key ones really are making social connection a strategic priority. Think about how that would work. How wonderful that would be. Instead of looking at people as a human resource, as an asset, if you just think of them by what they can do to help you achieve your goal in building a product, delivering a service, that team concept, you're missing out on so much more. But if you embrace them as companies as an ensemble, as I like to call it, you get so much more from that person. So making social connection a strategic priority, training and empowering leaders and managers to promote connection. One of the things when I contrasted ensembles with teams is the things, if you only think of these environments in terms of teams, you're almost forced to evaluate people by talent alone, by how they achieve this goal of yours. And that's you leave out so much of the person when you just look at their talent. Because people, then you're not allowed to make mistakes. You're not allowed to, be your authentic self. So, embracing that whole person. So, training leaders to promote that connection, because that's the only way to really to achieve this is through connection. Educating the workforce, create practices and a workplace culture that allows people to connect to one another as a whole person. Which is amazing, because nowadays our workplaces are so and we're working hard to do this, so culturally diverse, and have such rich possibilities at connection that are right there for us to connect in ways that we never thought were possible. So, policies that protect workers' ability I love this one, to nurture their relationships outside of work. That's that whole, how can you be a best friend at work, that fifth fact that Mark talked about, if you just remained at work? How do you build empathy for somebody that was experiencing something at home, that now they're at work, and it has to be, outside of work as well. So it's that whole person, and considering the opportunities and challenges posed by flexible work hours and arrangements. I love this one. That may impact workers' ability to connect with others. My daughter works out in New York. It does a lot of work in the disability community, and the neurodivergent communities, which ADA just doesn't really do, okay, the ramps and the doors are great for workplace, but companies still haven't figured out how these other marginalized groups can connect to people, and how that changes. That's still a struggle. And so we need to embrace, all of those things. So and not just, as I said, look at people as a human resource, and how they affect ROI. There's so much more um, to that. So I love this. And what can individuals do? I just, as I said, there's some really interesting things. Be responsive, supportive, and practice gratitude. Wow. I never practiced gratitude at work. I started working on that in recovery, and it's still a struggle. I remember the first time I went to in my recovery. So we said, well, you should do a gratitude journal. I'm like, what the heck's that? And they said, well, just write gratitude on a piece of paper and list things out. And I sat and looked at it for a half hour. It was a blank page. I'm like, really, nothing? You're not grateful for anything? And it wasn't that I wasn't grateful for things. I was grateful for the easy things. My kids. I get to live in, this great, wonderful, high valued, high work ethic, environment we have in the Midwest and in Wisconsin. So all these things, the easy stuff. But I was missing out on little things that I could be grateful for every day, that changed my day, changed my life, changed my relationship with the people, the gratitude. And so I got that in my personal life. I never got that at work. That was always a struggle. It was always missing. And because I still had that work-life balance mindset. And so when I read this, I'm like, practicing gratitude at work? Oh man. That allowed me to connect to people more than I ever have before, and appreciate them, and understand. So I loved that. Um, just just seeking help during times of struggle. I never looked within my work group to do that. My work life, my work, persona, their ability of the people that I work with, I spend most of the day with. I never looked to them to help in those matters, and it's really redefining work. We were able to define education in radical ways when we realized that, yes, schools were built to educate. That's our mission. But when we realized that kids were coming into our schools that didn't have a breakfast, we learned how to feed them to make them better students. Like, is the mission of the school to feed kids? No, but we figured out that that's necessary. And it's the same thing with, if we see that what makes students the best students is to understand their entire, the wholeness of the student is a huge factor. Companies, are lagging, are behind schools in that respect. So we need to look at it the same way, and change that way. And then just the whole, being responsive, and being, during conversations, that whole connection. I did a kind of workshop yesterday with a therapy group in Milwaukee that does sound therapy, drum therapy, and they were trying to build kind of the ensemble in their work. They were struggling. They had a lot of new people, and some people left. There were some personality things. So I came in and did this thing, and one of the improv games that I played was to form their ensemble was it was I had them pair up in groups, and I had, the first person start telling a story, like what I did this weekend, and the second person was going to interrupt. And then we did that. And I go, how did that make you feel to be constantly interrupted? And I go, yeah, it definitely had a feel. It definitely made me feel, not connected. I go, well, that happens all the time because our minds are constantly going, I've got a better story, more relevant story, a funnier story, and we want to jump in. And so I follow that up with a second game. It's like, now the second person, I want you to start the story. And the first person from before, I want them to interrupt, but this time acknowledge interruption. Acknowledge and make and say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted. Go on. And how did that make you feel? It was still an interruption, but it had a different, connection. And they said, yeah, I felt different. I still didn't like being interrupted, but I was okay. There was a little bit, I understood. And sometimes interruptions are necessary, but so being able to acknowledge that you did that and apologize is huge in making that connection. One question I got from one of the therapists was, yeah, but sometimes I use interruptions to connect. I hear something and I want to connect. There was another game where I said, I want somebody to start a story with 2 or 3 sentences, and then the next person has to continue the story, but the first word they say has to be the last word that the first person said. And so it was this improv game of you had to wait till the last word because that's what you had used to continue the story. And she said, well, sometimes I got to interrupt. And I said, well, that was that third exercise we did, because what's if somebody said, this weekend I went to the beach, and you interrupted and said, oh, I love the beach. I'm going to the beach next week and I'm connecting and I'm experiencing the joy. But what this first person wanted to end their story was with, but somebody kicked sand in my face and in my food, and it turned out to be a horrible day. But you interrupted immediately and talked about beach, and they just wanted to get some empathy about their struggles at the beach, and you've missed a chance to connect with somebody on that level because you interrupted to wanted to have a connection. So communication is so key in practicing all of this stuff. I doing this in work settings is amazing. We understand individually some of these exercises to be present, to calm yourself down, the breathing exercises, the stretching exercises. Those are great things to do individually, but to do a quick exercise with the team to create the ensemble has the same effect. When I go into schools, and I get the auditorium fills up, one of the first games I have them do before I do anything, I call it a warm up, is a game called Never Have I Ever. And I said, I'm going to shout out some activities or locations, and I'll say, never have I been to the grocery store. Well, if you have been to the grocery store, I want you to throw your hands up and yell, yeah, it's great. If you haven't been to a grocery store, you don't do anything. So I started listing things out. Never have I, ridden a horse, and have to, everyone does that. Never have I burned myself with a curling iron. Never have I dyed my hair. Never have I eaten food that falls on the floor. All these things. And after that's done, that's the very first thing we do. I say, why do we do that? I said, we do that because it gets, we're doing this, we're jumping up, our hands are yelling out. It gets our energy flowing. The second thing is we're doing that because it's outside our comfort zone. It's really fun to do that in companies. This whole, just doing something you don't normally do in a business meeting or in school is act out. But the last thing I said, the reason why we do that is because when everyone walked through that door into the auditorium, we all walked through with all this stuff in our minds. Some of us had a great breakfast. Some of us didn't have a breakfast. Some of us, were stressed out by something a conversation that we had online last night or in the halls yesterday. Some of us may have had the best thing that's ever going to happen to us all week already happen, and we're elated about that. Some of us are nervous about a test we're taking next, next period. All these things are in our head. So we do an activity like this that's fun, that breaks that cycle and gets us present. And imagine if we did that in our workplace, before a meeting, just like, let's be present, let's connect, let's be, let's get our heads all in the same place. It's an amazing thing. So again, this report, it's got a lot of great stuff. It's really deep, but it really talks to the stuff that Mark and I were talking about, not just humor, but connection. And what we talked about too is how to use humor to enhance that connection. So, but the connection is really the key thing. I wasn't so much about humor, but Mark and I just talked about this, and I said it's an important piece, especially post-COVID. Yeah, I wanted to make sure people were aware of that. But I think now, oh yeah, I was going to talk about one last thing. There was one more slide, wasn't there? Just, the deadliness of don't talk, staying in isolation, it's a tough place to be, isolated, as I've said. I'll repeat it again. A lot of these things, as we know, are diseases of isolation, but we cannot heal in isolation. It demands connection. So, and our minds immediately go into, I got to fix it. I talk a lot about too, when Chris and I were both in New York and I saw him struggling. The rest of my family was in Wisconsin, and I, as an older brother, I felt I needed to help him out. I thought he was struggling. At that time, I just thought he was just going to lose this dream job of his, and so I had to help him out. I thought I had to come up with the answers and the solutions, and because we didn't know what a first responder was. This was pre 9/11. I thought I had it, and what we know now is, the big help's coming, the big trucks. All you got to do is connect. All I should have done was to connect with Chris and wait for the real help to come. I didn't have to come with a solution, solutions and solve the problem. I just needed to connect and understand and communicate to him that this sense of belonging and connection. So yeah, and as I said when I first started out, one of the blessings of this experience of mine was that I realized right away that I needed to talk about it, and I have been doing that for 26 plus years, and I will continue to do that, and it's made all the difference. I'm not in isolation because of that. So we have a little time left for questions, I think. But I want to thank Mark and everyone for putting this on. And
thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
We do have a few questions. So I'm just going to put them out there to you, Mark and Tom, and answer. Either one of you can answer. The first one is, I wonder if humor can also help access sadness, anger, or other emotions. Thoughts?
As long as it's not, as I said, it can manage a lot of emotions, but don't use humor to shy away from the emotion. It can be a great Band-Aid, but the wound is still there. So you need to address that. It doesn't heal completely. You need to address the sadness, the grief, which, so I've talked about.
The next one says, to respect people's needs for safety, you suggest the importance of bringing humor in when appropriate. What phase of the therapy processes and what therapy processes work best to integrate and be appropriate for humor to be safe and healing?
There's a part of me that believes that things can happen early on, even when we first meet people, that lends itself to like some light laughter, right? One thing that Tom had a slide up that says that our whole thing is not It's not to get an applause. We're not like working a comedy club, but we really are there to make human connections. So I think in every phase of it, right? We can overuse it. We ourselves can be clinical people who every time a client shares something uncomfortable, then we use humor. What we're basically saying to the clients, I'm uncomfortable with these emotions you express, and so I'm using humor. But I think through all phases of it. And I think there's a season for everything. When we're dealing with like clients dealing with grief and loss, we're dealing with grief and loss. We may not be as humorous in that moment, but I think all phases.
I also think just acknowledging, like especially in a therapy session, it's like, yeah, we're going to talk about heavy stuff. We're going to talk about a lot of different emotions. But you know what I'd like to do is kind of put it out there as kind of a goal or something is I also want to laugh, and if we can find a place together to laugh together, I think we both will benefit from this therapy that we're in. But kind of put it out there. Just say, may not be now, may take years, but I would like to laugh at some point. Sometimes
I used to, Tom, I used to have something that we included in intakes called taking a client's funny bone history.
Yeah.
Whereas part of intake, all those serious questions we ask clients, we're like, what makes you laugh? What kind of things are funny to you that are not funny to other people? Who are your favorite comedians? Even that whole process introduces the idea that humor can be introduced. I love it when our group therapy starts 15 minutes before group, and then you linger 15 minutes afterwards, because that lends itself to all these opportunities to interject humor. So we have a problem, and it's this. Half of the clients we work with miss their second outpatient session.
Mm.
And anything we can do to lighten the moment in that first session increases the chances that people will show up for the second and the third and the fourth.
We've got one final question and 2 minutes left here. It says, how do you reach clients with humor who say, I don't like people, or very seldom go out into the public?
And what's that about when people say they don't like people? I think there's so many of the people that we work with have been injured by people, and they've come to rely on substances as being more predictable than human beings. I don't trust people, but I know exactly how this drug will make me feel. So I think connecting with people starts with a trusting relationship with you, the case manager, the recovery coach, the therapist, the counselor. And then momentum can be built from there, from you to a larger group.
as I said,
Go ahead.
As I said, as humans, we are hardwired for connection. So how are you getting that? Those two statements we need connection. It's otherwise, you're in isolation. So you need that. So, and people are necessary for that connection. So, yeah, it doesn't have to be this jump in the deep end of the pool of humanity, but eventually you got to claw your way out of that isolation, and little by little, it's people are, connection is what's going to do that.
Well, I want to thank both Mark and Tom for this amazing presentation. The recording and the presentation slides will be available on our Great Lakes ATTC and Great Lakes MHTTC websites by the end of the week. So please feel free to share it with your networks, because I'm sure a lot of other people will appreciate it as well. And I want to thank everyone here for being here. You will receive a certificate of attendance via email if you attended this session in full. Please check out our calendars for more upcoming trainings, and we hope to see everyone soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Jen, Melissa, and Tom, everyone. Thank you.